Welcome to One Man's Tracks, the second-hand music channel, and today I've got another exciting, subversive, and sarcastic rock outfit to discuss and explore with you today. It's a band that started out as a group called the Sharp Dressed Men that formed with Mike Morris and Wade Worthington back in 1979 in San Francisco. They'd be joined in '81 by drummer Mike Borden and bassist Billy Gold, and changed their name to Faith No Man while they started to record their first few songs in producer Matt Wallace's parents' garage. Around the time of their first single being released in '83, Borden, Gold, and newfound keyboardist Roddy Bottom would leave Mike the Man Morris behind and form the group we know today as Faith No More. They played with a number of vocalists and guitarists throughout this time. Even Courtney Love played with them for a stint, but they'd settle on Chuck Mosley as their vocalist and Jim Martin as their guitarist, and they'd start pooling their money together to help record their debut album. And while they were doing so, they actually got signed to a newly formed independent label called Morden Records, whose very first release was Faith No More's very first album, We Care a Lot, in 1985. They signed with Slash Records in '86 for the release of their major label debut the following year, Introduce Yourself. While touring that record, Chuck Mosley's behavior became increasingly erratic according to the band, and when they returned, they parted ways with him and would start recording and working on material for their upcoming album, The Real Thing, before they even found their new vocalist. They settled on Mr. Bungle frontman Mike Patton, who only had about a month to write and record for that album after joining Faith No More. Off the back of the band's diverse and experimental rock blend, that became their most commercially successful record, selling over 4 million copies and even receiving a Grammy nomination. It was such a hit that Slash even signed on Mr. Bungle and released their even more wildly experimental self-titled debut in 1991. You can look forward to a Mr. Bungle review next week, but for now, I'm here to talk about this. Faith No More's only ever top 10 record, released in June of 1992 through Slash and Reprise Records. Produced once more by Matt Wallace, this is Angel Dust. This album sits in its very own unrestricted lane that honestly took me a few listens before I started to truly appreciate just how unique their approach to making a song was. Faith No More's sound is like a theatrical alternative to alternative rock, and this album takes what they learned on The Real Thing, totally evolves and changes and grows off of it, filling it out to fantastic results. It's got such a fun, atypical track list with some simple, cleaner, straightforward cuts, and then you get some wildly variable rock epics that can flow from funk to metal to hip-hop to almost an alternative dance mix that are brought together by Patton's incredible vocal range. The bass lines are bonkers, the drums are just nice and loud, the keyboards and sampling is atmospheric and interesting, and the confounding and out there lyricism is still somehow melodic and catchy. With the variety of songs that come up on this experimental alternative metal concoction, it can be a bit of a difficult project to summarize, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it and the band down in the comments. Was this your first Faith No More album? Let me know. I'm loving exploring their catalog, and in particular the songs off this radical crane-covered '92 classic that kicks off with a great wall of guitars and the grooviest of bass lines on Land of Sunshine. This song, as well as the following song, Caffeine, were both written during an experiment with sleep deprivation where Patton just took lines from fortune cookies as well as a Scientology personality questionnaire book that had lines like, "Does emotional music have quite an effect on you?" It's super fun and wacky. It's like this strange combination between like a funky rock opera and like a carnival parade. This rambunctious and dreadfully hypnotic combination. Caffeine takes a bit more of a straightforward metal approach to the song. The songwriting not so much. Even when Patton's in a regular headspace, his songwriting is more of this tongue-in-cheek spattering of symbols and bold imagery and dialogues that fit into the theme of the song, which is generally just whatever the title of the song is, and you can sort of pick it apart from there. It's definitely not meant to be taken like at face value, literally. More or less, the words are what fit in with the melody the best and what sounds great on this product here. I don't know. It's a really interesting approach, and it's probably what enabled him to write all the songs on The Real Thing so quickly after hearing the songs just a couple of weeks before having to record on top of them. Next, the band's only #1 hit on the alternative songs chart comes in to inspire an entire generation of screamo bands. This is Midlife Crisis, a ruthless, heart-ripping, emotional alternative metal banger that it rocks so hard! After lashing out with Midlife Crisis, RV slows things down, turns that hatred inwards, taking on the perspective of this alcoholic, suicidal father figure. The presentation feels a little Tom Waitsy, sort of a goofy, bluesy, stumbling around like an angry merry-go-round approach that kind of feels like it represents the cycle of neglect being passed down from generation to generation. I think that Smaller and Smaller is probably about First Nations and how their lands continued to shrink due to European oppression and how they were forced to live day to day due to this restrictive lifestyle they were forced into. The kind of howl-like native chant that interludes in the middle here lends itself to that description, but the lyrics are always vague enough that it could be about slavery or maybe a migrant struggle. Either way, it's an in-your-face and effective cut. Everything's Ruined is a theatrical, almost glam metal song that highlights the capitalist drive to invest in the future, and it equates that with having children, comparing a child to a shiny copper penny that exponentially grows into $1 million, but in the end it all turns out that their investment was counterfeit and it didn't pay off because I'm thinking it's probably that cycle of neglect I was talking about back on RV. Horror metal is my best description of Malpractice, a radical song that sees some inhuman screams and some excellent tension-building phases. Then you get on to Kindergarten, who's sparking some new metal vibes with some hip-hop influence, heavy metal that is all about trapping yourself in the past, being doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. Once again, hitting on those cyclical themes of RV and Everything's Ruined. Now for the song about homosexual oral sex, it's Be Aggressive, a tongue-in-cheek, or rather dick-in-cheek song that was actually written by Bottom as a joke in order to make Patton sing I swallow, over and over on stage. It's impressive how much he commits to whatever role he tries on in basically every song and every outfit he's in. It's one of the reasons I'm going to be talking about Bungle next week, so look forward to that once again. This song incorporates the classic B-E-A-G-G-R-E-S-S-I-V-E, aggressive, that cheer you hear at like a school game. It's hilariously catchy and just a lot of fun. Release your aggression and you'll reach a small victory, this album's most approachable track. Bordering on alternative dance this time. There's this intensely symbolic and histrionic music video that accompanies it that was actually nominated for an MTV Music Video Award, and it's definitely worth checking out. They saved some of the best song names for last, with Crack Hitler being followed by Jizz Lobber, Hitler feeling like a mix between a Red Hot Chili Peppers song and a John Williams score. It's one of the most adventurous funk rock numbers I've ever heard, and then Jizz Lobber is a nearly 7-minute world-ending metal epic. It's super dark, has some ripping Manson-esque vocals, and this desperate heavy metal atmosphere that creates a tremendous sense of dread that all culminates up into this heavenly organ-backed choir that pulls you up out of the dread and onto the closing instrumental. The band performs a rendition of the theme from the 1969 buddy drama Midnight Cowboy, whose accordion sort of sways away any lingering discomfort that you might have after this wild hour of darkly humorous alternative musical masterclass. This album was re-released in '93 with a cover of the Commodore's Easy tacked on to the end as sort of a spiteful replacement for their Black Sabbath War Pigs cover that became so popular. When people would request that song live, they would turn on the Commodores instead. It actually was released as a fifth single for this album and went on to become one of the band's biggest hits, just adding on to the majesty of this avant-garde rock opus that even 30 years after its release is still grabbing new Faith No More fans. While touring this tremendous follow-up to their breakthrough, Jim Martin clearly lost interest in being the guitarist for Faith No More with the direction their sound was going in, and so they had to recruit a new guitarist in order to record their 1995 album King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime, with Mr. Bungle bandmate Trey Spruance joining for just the recording of that, leaving before the tour. They got together one last time, pulled in another guitarist, John Hudson's, a former roommate of Billy Gold's, and recorded their sixth album of the year. I believe that came out in 1999 and would be the last we'd hear from Faith No More for a long while. It wouldn't be until 2009 that they'd come back together, do a Second Coming tour, and then it wouldn't be until 2015 that we'd get some new Faith No More material, with Soul Invictus being released over 15 years after Album of the Year, and being their first album since this album to maintain the same lineup as their previous album. So there's some great chemistry. It's great to see the band back together making new stuff, and they were touring up till Corona, and then the whole thing happened. It's a mess. They've tried to reschedule. It's just no good. I'm not going to keep my fingers crossed, but there's faint hope that maybe in my lifetime there'll be one more Faith No More album. I'll be able to go to a Faith No More show and just experience these phenomenally influential artists live. Who knows? Either way, I'm grateful for the material they've given me already. Tons of experimental alternative metal music to dive right into that I'm just certain to continue to love. Let me know your thoughts, your favorite albums, songs, favorite show you've been to of Faith No More. I'd love to hear it down in the comments below. Like the video if you made it to the end. Here's how to order next week's Mr. Bungle review for a deeper look into the Patton verse. Here's a couple more albums you might enjoy. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Sing and rejoice! So sing and rejoice!